comments on House File 2563.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House File 2563 deals with abortion-related drugs. And I'm going to start with the amendment. There is an amendment because I'd like us to all be looking at the same piece of legislation. If you don't mind, I'll save the rest of my opening for post-back.
Very good. Chair recognizes Representative Wood for opening comments on Amendment 3990.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment is very, very simple. The original bill had references to abortion reversal pills and abortion reversal information. This simply takes out those pieces and any reference to those pieces. Along with my opening, I'd just like to remind everyone that this has been publicly available amendment since March 3rd when I looked it up, just in case anyone wondered when this popped up. So those are my opening comments for the amendment.
Very good. Any questions from the committee or comments on Amendment 3990? Yes, Chair recognizes Representative Matson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Wood, I really appreciate this amendment, and I will acknowledge that I'm sorry that I did not see it in an appropriate early enough time before we had the subcommittee, but I do appreciate that you made it available at the subcommittee to everyone right off the bat. I do just want to acknowledge why this amendment is so important for those who may not realize it. I think it's important to recognize first and foremost that abortion reversal is not an actual thing that is proven to work in a safe way, or to work in general among a larger population. What this would have, without this amendment, the bill would have mandated physicians to lie to their patients about the efficacy of such a procedure, and I do find that abhorrent. I would say, I want people to know that we've been debating this issue since my first term 8 years ago. And people should know that the one attempt at a true peer-reviewed clinical trial on so-called abortion reversal had to be canceled when women bled out and had to be hospitalized. There is a reason why this, when it was a bill standalone before, had never made it to the House floor. I'm glad that it will not now, and I encourage support for the amendment.
Any other comments or questions on the amendment of Representative Wood?
I simply want to thank those in the medical community that had conversations with us. I'll go ahead and take a moment here for my closing of the amendment to thank them for not only this amendment, but also the one that we were able to have prepared between the original first sub and committee, which were one after another. So I just wanted to take this moment to say thank you, because we have been having continued conversations about different things that are very, very unique in the medical world versus other industries that our code covers, and I just want to thank you for all of your expertise. So if I forget to say it in my closing at the end of today, thanks to those special people who have lended their expertise in this field to this language. So that will be my closing for this.
All right, I'll ask one at a time. Was there any other comments from the committee? That's okay. You were very efficient. No, that's okay, because I don't see any other hands. You've heard Representative Wood move approval of Amendment 3990. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The amendment has been adopted. Now we're back on House File 2563 as amended. Any questions or comments from the committee? Yes, Representative Wood.
Now I'm going to go ahead and finish my opening comments, and I apologize to the committee for going out of turn there a second ago. Okay, so now that we are all looking at the amended version, I want to go through a couple things that this bill specifically does. First and foremost, I'm really proud of the conversations that we have had relating to our current abortion and related code section definitions. The first thing that this bill does is enhances our current definition of abortion to make it crystal clear that the treatment of a miscarriage is not considered an abortion. I know we've heard stories that have happened in other states of folks going through traumatic experiences and folks feel that our current definition does a lot to explain it, but the first and foremost piece here is I want to be very clear, treating a miscarriage in Iowa is not an abortion. Very proud of that. The few other things that this bill deals with is the in-person dispensing and discussions relating to any dispensing of one of those items, and specifically that any dispensing of those medications outside of a healthcare facility would be in violation of this law. It also has a report that could be filed due to the acknowledgement of a serious complication of someone who has taken a medication. What all of that mumbo jumbo means is that there are folks out there who are I'm going to loosely use the word dispensing, giving unlicensed, unregulated, potentially out of state or even out of country medications that we have no idea what's in them. I have been really proud of the conversations that we've had surrounding this legislation, because the reality is that when women in our state are getting medical care, I want them to be going to one of our fantastic doctors that I already mentioned, who have lended their expertise to this legislation. I don't want to see folks ordering something off the internet, getting something mailed to them, something potentially laced, something that did not actually come from a licensed, regulated Iowa facility here. And so this, I'm going to go ahead and conclude my opening comments there, but this legislation is incredibly important to make sure that women who are getting care are knowing what is coming to them. So.
Very good. Thank you, Representative Wood. Any comments from the committee or questions? Chair recognizes Representative Matson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I obviously served on the subcommittee for this bill, and I actually, if it's okay, Representative Moore, could I ask you to yield?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I'm only doing this because of something that you said in committee just a week or two ago. Sorry, I forget exactly when. But you mentioned very specifically, you said, in the Appropriations Committee, when we have bills here, we talk about the appropriation in the Appropriation Committee.
Right.
Because there is no appropriation in this bill,
Yes.
I guess I'm wondering, is there any particular point I should cover in this bill?
Well, this bill was, because of the calendar, the closest to being toward the end. This bill and the one before it was assigned to us by the Speaker. So the reason we're taking it up, whether there's an appropriation or not, is if the Speaker assigns a bill to my committee, we will take it up, which is why we're taking this up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate it. Okay. I bring this up only because I want to acknowledge the reason why the bill is in this committee to begin with. It's a procedural move to keep a bad policy bill alive that did not survive the vote. While it's disappointing, and in my opinion, Republicans are holding themselves to the same standard they hold the minority party to on this issue here, I want to say that the issue here is not actually procedure. I'm frustrated by the procedure and by the process of where we're at with this bill, but that's not the main issue. The main issue is the devastating effects of this bill and the message that, in my opinion, the bill sends to women in our state. First and foremost, I want to mention that there is just fundamentally incorrect language in this bill repeatedly. It is use of the term chemical abortion. That is not language that is generally recognized by medical providers in this state. It is a term used by some who have a fundamental opposition to abortion, and while they have every right to use whatever language they want, it doesn't mean that language should be in Iowa code. So I have strong opposition to that. I also have a lot of concerns about some of the requirements for physicians in here. One of them is requiring physicians to have their patients sign these very specific FDA forms. I think it's important to recognize that in some of these cases, for these particular medications, those FDA forms don't actually exist. So I'm unclear about what we're going to be requiring physicians to have their patients sign. Fundamentally, I have a lot of concerns around what I see as fear-mongering language around trauma in this bill. And it's important to recognize that there are already very strong safeguards in place related to the use of medication abortion. And I certainly understand the intent that Representative Wood was talking about regarding medication by mail and wanting to make sure that Iowans are protected. As I mentioned in sub, I will have a conversation with anybody who wants to talk about making sure that any medication that's coming into the state is safe and effective. I don't think it should apply just to this particular medication. If this is really an important issue to talk about medication by mail, then let's talk about all medication by mail and not point out one very specific item. And I think if this bill were truly just about medication by mail, then the bill would look very different than what is in front of us today. And so, for all of those reasons and probably many more, I will encourage you to vote today.
Thank you, Representative Matson. Chair recognizes Representative Srinivasan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will Representative Wood yield for a few questions?
You yield?
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Representative Wood. As anybody starts a new job, or even honestly in the medical field, every year we have to take those training videos that go over the basics of how to wash your hands, etc. The stuff that you put on the TV in the background as you do. One of those videos always covers HIPAA. Are you familiar with HIPAA?
Yes, I am.
To clarify to anybody who might not be, HIPAA is a law that was passed in 1996 at the federal level by HHS that we have to abide by as medical providers to ensure that we do not share any information that could put our patient's identity at risk. A key part of that is called PHI, or Protected Health Information. Are you familiar with the Protected Health Information?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell me what is included in PHI criteria?
I should have clarified, I have had other bills previously, so I'm relatively familiar with the terms. However, I do lean on our medical community folks for their specific expertise on each and every bill. So if you'd like to allude to what you're actually asking, and maybe I have heard of it.
Yeah, no, of course. So I just was wondering if you knew what the criteria were under PHI, what would qualify. So the basic rule under PHI, if you violate any of the pieces of PHI, then you could lose your license. And as you mentioned, there are wonderful doctors in our state, we wouldn't want any of them to lose their licenses. So if there were any parts of this bill, an recruiting requirement, that would cause one of them to lose their license, would you be concerned?
So there is confidentiality of the woman's information potentially, and this would only be a report to report a recognized emergency complication. And if you're wondering what the list of those complications are, we got them directly from the drug labels themselves that are currently used for this process and from the FDA's warnings.
And that's not my concern. My concern is about the patient identifying information that is directly violated in HIPAA, then somebody would lose their license. If we passed a bill that required physicians to violate and actually share PHI criteria, they would lose their license. Would you want a bill passed that does that?
Could you explain to me how this bill is doing that?
And I'm happy to do that, but I'm curious, would you want a bill passed that would do that?
Of course, I would not want to violate HIPAA, and if there's an adjustment that you feel that this needs, I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
I appreciate that. If we can do that and fix it, I think that would be great, because the reporting requirement in here actually says that you have to have not just the state, but the county of residence of the patient, as well as the facility where the patient received treatment. According to HIPAA and the PHI criteria, stating anything geographically more specific than the state of a patient automatically violates the sharing of PHI. So this would put our doctors, who are already scarce in our state, significantly at risk because they would violate the patient identity requirements. And so the reporting requirement here does have a lot of concern for me. So if we could remove that piece to make it where it's actually compliant with what would not lose licenses for our state physicians, that would be very, very critical at this juncture. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Khan first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to briefly build a little bit on the privacy conversation we just had. My opposition to this bill comes from privacy concerns related to not only, of course, the hoops that I would have to jump through to participate in medical care that's supposed to be something between me and my doctor, which is just fundamentally part of this language, but also the complication report. My primary concern here regards geography. I recognize and appreciate the fact that it can't say where she's from, what happened, what doctor she has, where she had what facility she had it in, but it can say what town she's from, and small towns, information that can get out there can be pretty identifying, right? So I fear that when someone's already going through a trauma of having a complication from medication, now that information is not just published in a report, but is put online. And this is a report that goes online. So my primary concerns about this bill are, one, it's not a budget bill, and so I didn't think we were supposed to be talking about it here. Two, there are privacy concerns not only with my own body, but also with the reporting that could out a woman who's having now a medical complication. So that's why I'm in it.
Any other questions or comments? Chair recognizes Representative Zach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I spoke a little bit earlier about a couple communities in our state that have lost their birthing centers. There is nowhere in the Cole County you can safely give birth. We know that Iowa, in part because of its draconian 6-week abortion ban, is 51st in OBGYNs per capita among states. It is extremely difficult to find pregnancy care in the state of Iowa. We know that people who do have kids in the state of Iowa struggle to find pediatric dentistry, pediatric health care. They're struggling to afford the rising cost of groceries and gasoline. What is the Republican solution to these problems? Representative Deacon on Twitter about an hour ago, abortion illegal, surrogacy illegal, IVF illegal. So you are chipping and chipping and chipping away at the basic freedoms of everyday Iowans who just want some help accessing health care and affording to raise their families.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Representative Wood for closing comments on House File 2563.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I know that I'm standing between everybody and going home tonight. So, because I covered so much in my 2 opening comments, even out of order as the one was, apologies again. I just wanted to note that I really do appreciate the robust conversations we've had. Representative Srinivas, if you would like to have further conversations on that reporting piece, I just want to give a little background quickly because I didn't specifically say this before. I was hoping that piece of the legislation could be a tool for our folks who are actually going after the black market versions of these medications. So someone, unfortunately maybe takes something that's laced, has a horrible reaction because it is who knows what, and then they're in the emergency room and the doctors are thinking, hey, we've seen 2 of these this month. Do we maybe think somebody's given away stuff to folks that they shouldn't be, and not coming from our reputable licensed physicians? Maybe it's coming from the street or a mail-in situation that isn't on the up and up, I'll be polite and say. But if we have concerns about it from our medical community, the first amendment we had was from concerns of theirs. This was from concerns of how it relates to their malpractice. And I have not ever shut the door on our medical community having conversations about how this legislation would work with their daily life. And my hope was that it could be a tool for them to see less of those folks who are getting access to something that they didn't realize was dangerous. But if it needs adjusted, I'm absolutely happy to work with you. Representative Zagner, I'd just like to note if we were on the floor, I would have point of ordered you because I did not keep that. A different representative did. So very respectfully, if you have problems with that viewpoint, I would ask you to consult with that representative and not put that on me. Because I wanted to lead to my final point. I've already talked about all of the great things that this bill does, and I've talked about how I'm open to more conversation yet before we get to the floor. I thanked our medical community, but I want to talk about how special this language was in crafting. If you're somebody who would like to see that heartbeat bill repealed, this bill stands. It would work with that. If you are somebody who loves our current heartbeat bill, the language was written to also work hand in hand with that. The point I'm trying to make here is this bill does not restrict abortion timelines. It simply works to make sure that the person, that a woman who is going for this related medical conversation is a licensed physician in the state of Iowa and not an illegal, illicit, drug activity coming from who knows where. So, with that, I would urge my colleagues, to please support this. Please vote for this to plug some holes in our drug situation in Iowa, and please support this for Iowa women and their safety. So, with that, I move the bill, Mr. Chair.
You've heard the motion by Representative Wood to move approval of House File 2563. All those in favor will vote aye. Opposed, nay. Clerk will call the roll.
Representative Warren.
Aye.
Representative Belin.
Aye.
Representative Shrivas.
No?
Representative Bergen.
Aye.
Representative Long.
Aye.
Representative Collins.
Aye.
Representative Cooley.
No.
Representative Belmont.
Aye.
Representative Johnson. Representative Comfort. Representative Waller.
Aye.
Representative Wilson.
Aye.
Representative Matson.
No.
Representative Meyer.
Aye.
Representative Monson.
Aye.
Representative Sorensen.
Aye.
Representative Stone.
Aye.
Representative Wilbur.
No.
Representative Wills.
Aye.
Representative Wood.
Aye.
Representative Sacker.
No.
14 yes, 7 no, 4 abstentions.
The bill, having received 14 affirmative votes and 7 negative votes, will move to the House floor as a committee bill. Are there any questions or comments from the committee before we adjourn? Seeing none, Representative Wilbur moves we rise.